I have so much compassion too for the person that doesn't know what to do or what to say because nobody teaches you this.
Hmm.
Nobody teaches you how to live life, you know, after someone you love is no longer in this world with you, and nobody teaches you what to say or what's you just
Yeah.
go along and you learn that. And it's very unique.
Welcome to The Ownership Game with Gary Montalvo. What would it take to get into the driver's seat of your life and leave your mark? The Ownership Game starts now.
We've explored the subject of losing a loved one a few times on the show, but we haven't really explored the subject of grief itself. Grief is not something that is often discussed or talked about, at least not here in the United States. So when it happens, we're mostly unprepared for it. And as we get into today, at times we're unsupported in it. Today, we sit with my old friend, Grief Coach Katherine Brito. After meeting the love of her life, Katherine lost him 7 years later to cancer. She was a widow at the age of 35. Her journey through grief was painful, but it taught her a lot about how people in grief are supported and the way that they're not. Through her coaching practice and her hefty social media following, she's on a mission to give thousands of people validation and permission that it's 100% okay for them to grieve their way. Hello, my love. It
Hi.
is so good to have you on the show. It's so exciting because we've been friends for a real long time. We met in our 20s in New York. I think I was a little older than you. I might have been a little bit in my later 20s. I think you were in your early 20s.
Early 20s.
But, it was like that time in our lives when we are like trying to find ourselves, trying to, have fun and I think most of all we were trying to find love, right?
Yes.
Like we were kissing a lot of frogs, if you will, trying to find the one.
Yes, yes, yes. What a hunt.
What was that?
Said what a hunt.
What a hunt, right? There were many parties, many
Epic parties. Your parties were
clubs.
epic.
I do miss my parties. My parties were a lot of fun. A lot of club nights, a lot of hanging out, a lot of restaurants, a lot of birthdays. Yeah,
Yes.
we spent a lot of our formative years together, growing up and trying to find ourselves and trying to find love, right?
Yeah.
And so we kissed a lot of frogs, as I said earlier. So, and you finally found it, right? You finally found your guy.
Yes.
Tell me about Tony. I actually don't know the story because I had already left New York, so I don't even know how you met Tony. So I'm excited to hear the story.
We met super classic at a bar. He sent over a drink for me before
Really?
I very classic. And I got to this bar that my old roommate used to bartend at. So I used to go there all the time just to get like free drinks and pregame before going to where I really was gonna go. And it turns out that I got there 10 minutes after he did. And then when I left, he left 5 minutes after. It was his first time in Queens, and he was there for a party of a friend of his that wasn't even there. It was in the Bronx. So I don't know how he went from Jersey to Queens to get to the Bronx. And that was his very first day ever in Queens, the night that we met. And it was out of all places, that place. So he sent a
Oh.
drink over. I looked over to see if he was cute first. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'll accept. And then I went over to thank him, and it was history from there.
Oh my God, I love it. So okay, so he gets you this drink, you start talking. What struck you about him?
What? I'm
Other than
sorry,
he
what?
was cute. Like what struck you about him? What
Oh
what
my
um
gosh. He was a musician, and I'm obsessed with music, and musicians, and he just started talking about like, oh, I play the piano, I play the guitar, telling me all about the things that he likes to do. And I lied and said I was a musician too, trying to impress him. I was like, yeah, I play the piano too. Oh my God. And you know, but just, oh my God, he was so gentle and kind and sweet, and like just everything, his energy, his aura, like his eyes. I was just like hooked from the minute I walked up to him, and I was like this close, and it was like this instant connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So what happened next?
We went on a date a week after, and we were like inseparable from there. Our first date was a movie, I'm sorry, dinner and a concert, and then we were just like back and forth, Jersey Queens, and seeing each other all the time. And it wasn't one of those things like, okay, so are we together now? Like it just happened. We were like just all of a sudden we met all of a sudden in a relationship, moved in, got engaged, like everything just happened organically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So how long before you met and you moved in together and you got engaged?
So we met in 2010, November 2010. In September of 2012, we moved in, got
Okay.
engaged. 2 years later, got married a year later.
Okay. Okay. So it
So
wasn't like,
yeah,
because,
it
some of
wasn't mega
us,
fast.
some of us do have done the whole like 3 months later we're engaged and all things. So
That's okay too.
okay. Okay, awesome. So then you're building this life together, and tell me, like, I guess for me, like, where's your head at? Because you went from like the single lifestyle to now this, and you're building a home. It's like the dream in many ways, right? The things that
Yeah,
you've been aspiring to, and you now you're building your home and your life. And what was that like for you? Tell me a little bit about that.
it was crazy, Gary, because it was the only healthy relationship I had up
Mm.
until him, like you were saying about kissing the frogs. And I was in other relationships that were just very, you're in it,
Oh,
this isn't it,
I
but
remember.
going through the motions, and it
I
just
remember.
wasn't, it felt like it. Honestly, my entire relationship felt too good to be true. It really did. I felt like it wasn't. I was like, how is this possible? How are you like perfect for me? Like I couldn't have designed you better than this. Like
Mm,
it really felt like really just unbelievably perfect for me, and we were just, you know, we were perfect for each other. And it just felt like I was living we would call ourselves the Notebook sequel. And he would say ours is better because ours is like, they've got nothing on us. And, like it was just so amazing, Gary. He was really the whole cliche, my best friend, my favorite person, all of it. It was
yeah,
really to the 10th power. So it felt like I said, it felt too good to be true. It was the first time I experienced that with a man.
yeah.
I didn't have to
And
force anything. I didn't have to try. I didn't, it was just like this man saw me. I didn't have to say, like, I'm worthy, see me. Like, it was just unbelievable.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm so glad you said that because so I didn't get to spend a lot of time with Tony, but the thing that I remember is like he just adored you. Like he saw
Yeah.
you as the queen you are, and
Oh,
he
thank you.
he held you like in that place, and every
Yeah.
interaction that he had with you was from
Mhm.
that place of like just honoring you, and it was really beautiful. It was really, really
Oh, thank
beautiful.
you. Yeah.
Yeah. And then life lifed
Yep.
and did the thing. So when did you guys like tell me a little bit about how you discovered that he was sick and how did that all come about?
It was very sudden. He one day he just woke up with liver pain, and it wouldn't go away, and then the next day the pain was still there, then the next day. And I said, "Babe, you got to get this checked out. This is not going away. Something's got to be going on." The last thing I thought was cancer. I'm thinking like maybe it's an ulcer, maybe it's a stomach
Yeah,
bug, who knows. Um so yeah, he gets it checked out, and then gets the tests, and they said you have stage 4 cancer.
stage 4.
And it like just like that. And, he was misdiagnosed too. Like, first they thought it was colon cancer, then it was another cancer. And so we were like in and out of doctors' offices trying to figure out what cancer this really was. And it wasn't only until like 3 days before he passed that they said this is a neuroendocrine tumor, that he was properly diagnosed like that late into it.
Oh
But
wow.
it happened quickly. He passed away less than 5 weeks after being diagnosed. It was really fast, really aggressive. He,
Wow.
declined really, like, day and night, like, so
Yeah.
that was really hard because it was so much going on. And, Tony was a really strong man. He could carry a couch on his shoulder up and down a third floor. And he got to the point where I had to tie his shoes for him. He couldn't bend down. He couldn't walk. He could, so
Within
it was
five
just so
weeks, he
much.
deteriorated that quickly.
Big time. The last week, he barely even spoke. Barely. Like, every time he would try to speak, he'd just cough. So he barely said anything. He deteriorated like rapidly. Like, it just, like, this cancer ravished him. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
What was going on with you? Because I just try to put myself in your shoes for a second
mhm.
and just like the, I mean, you don't, 5 weeks, you don't even have time to wrap your head around it. You don't even have time to prepare mentally.
Exactly.
You don't even have time to like nothing.
Yeah.
Like it literally is like
Yeah.
a blip of time.
Absolutely. And then for me, I was in massive denial, which was, I then figured out that was my brain's way of protecting me
Mm-hmm.
going through that, because I didn't, as much as doctors were telling me, you have to prepare yourself, he could go any minute, like all these things, I was just like, no, he's going to be fine. And
Mm,
I just didn't believe he was dying until he was actually dead in front of me. So for me, it was like even more traumatic because I went through all of those motions after he passed. And it was just, it was
mm,
extremely shocking. All the things. I felt so many emotions all in 10 emotions in each breath, if you will.
yeah. What um what do you remember most from that period?
I remember how much he wanted to be with me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
in the hospital, he has two children from a previous marriage, and when they live in California, and when they came to see him, like, I would leave the room just to give them privacy, and they would text me, "Hey, Dad wants you to come back. Can you please come back?" And like, even when he was only at home one night, he just that same night that he came home, he died. And as the paramedics were bringing him in, he was like, "Where's my wife? Where's my wife?" And like, he just always wanted to be with me,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm very grateful now of the way that he got to die in our home. He died right here in our living room, and I was holding his hand. I was asleep, but I was holding his hand, and I know he knew I was there. And like, I remember that, and I'm so grateful for the fact that I had that, because not a lot of people get
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So
So
that's
you
that's
at
yeah.
that point you knew that he was passing and so you guys just brought him home to pass with you. Is that what was happening?
So no,
No. Oh.
I still, Gary, I did
Well, okay,
not.
but you didn't, but did the doctors and him
Oh
knew?
yeah.
Like, oh, okay, okay.
He was only in hospice one night, only because they said we need to make sure he can make it through the night
Mm-hmm.
and be able to even travel in an ambulance and not die in the ambulance. Like, that's how weak he was. But I didn't, I already had a care plan in mind. I had my
Mm.
mom fly in from DR. We were going to take care of him, get a nurse. Like, I saw
You,
him breathing 3 breaths per minute. And I was just like, why is he breathing like that? That's weird. So, like, I saw him literally die, but I
yeah.
had no idea that it was happening. So, even because he was asleep for a long time, and I fell asleep next to him, and since my mom knew he was going, she told me, go to sleep, if he needs anything, I'll
She
wake you
knew.
up. Well, she knew.
She
So
knew
she told
too.
me to, yeah, she told me go to sleep. So I pulled up the couch next to the bed, and I just held his hand, and I fell asleep next to him. And when he passed, she woke me up. So she was awake watching him to make sure she could get the exact
Uh-huh.
time for me, wake me up.
Uh-huh.
So when she told me that he died, I was like, what? And I like put my hand on his chest, and then I didn't feel the heartbeat. And I put my ear on his chest, and I didn't hear it. And since that's how I fell asleep with him every night, I would say to him, "You're my white noise machine." When I didn't hear his heart beating, that's when I was like, "Oh my God, Tony died." Like that's when I realized it. It's
Yeah.
crazy. Like from
Yeah.
beginning to end, I was in so much denial.
So, okay. Uh,
Yeah.
so what happened next?
So after that, it was, my life was a nightmare. I couldn't work. My mental health declined beyond belief. I blew my life savings, our life savings. I just supported myself with what we had. I'm a massage therapist. Before being a grief coach, I couldn't focus on anything. So I just I had a lot of support. So like I want to say that first. I did. My
Yeah.
friends and family were amazing, but of course, try as you might, if you don't know what this feels like or what's going on, and you just don't know what to say, and you say the wrong things, and so I just kept hearing, give it time, you'll feel better, and you're so young, you're gonna meet someone, like all these things. I know they meant well, but you know the worst
Yeah.
thing for me was hearing, just give it time, it'll get better, and like you have to move on. And I didn't know any other widow. I was so young. I was 35. I turned 36 a month after he died. He was 46. He was super young too. And so I was like the only widow I knew. And I joined my first support group 3 years later because a friend
Mm.
randomly told me, why don't you join a Facebook support group? And I was like, oh, what? I didn't even know that existed.
Mm.
So I logged on to this group, and everybody there was saying the same things I was feeling, like, oh my God, I wish people would stop telling me this and that. And I feel this and that. And I'm like, me too. So that's kind of how I got started into that's what got me going into coaching, to be honest. The fact that I said there's so many people that feel like me, and there's not enough spaces where these people are supported and they're
Mm-hmm.
like allowed to feel what they feel, and just that's what got me
Yeah.
started with wanting to create that space.
Yeah. It's interesting because I mean, I don't know if this is true everywhere in every
Mhm.
culture, but I think it's
Yeah.
true in American culture and Dominican culture where our parents are from. That you know, there's not a lot of space for grief, right? Like
No.
grief is something that's not really. Um, I mean, I don't remember talking about death. I don't
Yeah.
remember
Same.
you know, certainly a mourning. So I think it's the type of thing where people just are really uncomfortable uh, being with and dealing with, and certainly I've had the experience of someone I know losing someone and me not knowing what to say.
Yeah.
Like what can I possibly say in this moment to provide anything, right? And so
Mhm.
but then I get focused in my own discomfort about the fact that I don't know what to say, I don't know what to
Yeah.
do, and I'm uncomfortable with death. And so now I start acting weird with the friend or, the loved one. And even and then you start saying like things like that, I think, like oh,
Yeah.
just give it time, that time will pass, or it'll get better, or which
Yeah.
what does that mean, and do you even want it to get better at that point, right? Because
Yeah.
I would imagine when you're part of getting better, it's like may feel somehow like you're disconnecting yourself from the person that you're losing, right?
100%. 100%. And to your point, like it is hard to know what to say unless you've experienced it. And then, you know, it's the natural inclination for a human to see someone suffering is to want them to stop suffering. Like you
Mm-hmm.
want them to
Mm-hmm.
feel better. That's so normal. The thing is that we don't know that in grief, that's the exception to the rule. Like, and someone in deep grief would rather you say, listen, I don't know what to tell you. I have no idea what this must feel like for you, but I can imagine this is awful. I'm here. I love you. Take all the time you need. Do whatever works for you. Do whatever feels good to you. Your feelings are valid. That means everything, like everything. So, just
Just
a little. And it's also, it makes sense that grief is uncomfortable for someone, because there's so many things. I was deathly afraid of anything related to death. I couldn't even see a dead body in a movie
hmm
prior to Tony dying.
I
And
mean,
then with,
you couldn't see your husband dying,
right, like
right?
I,
Like if you want to
exactly.
get if you want to get deep about it, like you couldn't even see that, right?
That, yes, so the subconsciously I feel that too, that fear was there. And then with him, I like threw myself on his body, I kissed him, I was like, I cut some of his hair off, like I changed him before he went to the morgue, like I did all these things. So like I have such a different relationship with death now, but I became a little bit obsessed with death and wanting to know everything about it and the afterlife and what's a possibility, this and that. But just all that to say that I have so much compassion too for the person that doesn't know what to do or what to say, because nobody teaches you this.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody teaches you how to live life, you know, after someone you love is no longer in this world with you, and nobody teaches you what to say or you just
Yeah.
go along and you learn that. And it's very unique, because what may help me per se,
Mm.
for example, I don't like when someone says he's in a much better place, because for me, the best place for him to be is here with me,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
other people are like, yes, oh, he's in a much better place. That gives me comfort. So there's also that piece. Every
Yeah.
griever is just different, you know?
Yeah. Okay. I want to go in a bunch of different places with you. Um, but you said something interesting that caught my attention. You said you you dove into learning about the afterlife or what happens after death, or like what do you think that was about for you? Um, and anything you discovered that you want to share?
Yes, for me, Gary, honestly, it was settling for second best, which was, if I couldn't have Tony, which was my everything, the best of the best, right? Second best would be remaining connected to him and still being
Mm,
able to feel a connection to him and just be with him. Like I remember saying out loud in our bed, I sat down, I don't know, this was like maybe a month after, and I said, I want you to please always let me feel you. I want to feel you around. I want to get signs from you. I want to, if any of this hokey stuff is real, I want you to show me that it's real. I don't care what the books say. Like I want to know from you. And I've gotten so many signs from him since that there's no doubt in my mind. There's definitely an afterlife. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know. Are we just energy floating around? I don't know, but it is very real.
yeah.
Very. And it's also a belief. I'll say that too. Like if you don't believe in it, that's also your truth, and that's totally fine as well. Like, but for me, that's what's wanting to continue a bond with him. And I discovered there's a theory, continuing bonds, and I didn't even realize I was doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I write him letters, I talk to him, I do all these rituals
Regularly
and
now,
things.
this is
Oh
still
yeah,
we should actually
absolutely.
stop. Like, how long has it been since you lost Tony at this point?
February will be 7 years.
Seven
So
years.
almost
Okay.
seven.
Okay.
Almost seven.
And you're still in a relationship with him, it sounds like. You're still
Absolutely.
writing him letters, including him in your
Yeah.
life. You're still speaking to him.
Yeah.
You're yeah.
I do little rituals. Like I wrote a list down of every movie he loved, and I watch them like once a week. I watch one movie, and every Christmas I watch his favorite Christmas movie. On our anniversary, I go to our favorite restaurant and I order his favorite meal, and just all these little things that make me feel more connected to him. And at first, that was really hard to do, but
Mhm.
now I do it, and it's so comforting. So
Well, that was the question that came to me the moment you said that was number one, is that healthy? Like, are you reliving pain, and and then the other thing is like, is that keeping you stuck in the past? Is that like do you feel that you have moved on? And I don't know what that means. Like, we should talk about that, because in some
yeah,
ways he's still very much part of your life,
yeah,
you know. Right. So yeah,
yeah.
what does moving on look like, I guess, also.
So, I say continuing on with him, because like I am, so as you know, I'm repartnered, I'm engaged, and that happened. I met my current partner two and a half years after Tony died, and then a year later were official. I took my time. I dipped my toes into it. And so it's interesting because I did my therapist, very first therapy session I had was like 2 years after he died.
Mm.
And she said something very interesting to me. And she said, "You're not a widow." She's like, "You aren't a widow actually yet." And I'm like, "What do you mean? My husband died 2 years ago." She's like, "No, you're not a widow. You haven't packed his clothes from the closet. You haven't removed his
Mm.
toothbrush. You haven't removed his shoes. You haven't done anything." He's like, "You are waiting for your husband to come back. You're still married to him. You're still his wife. He's just not in your home. But you don't see yourself as a widow. So you still see yourself as that you are like your husband just is maybe away on a business trip and he's coming back at some point." And I didn't even realize it because it's true, Gary. Even when I met my current partner, I was with him for a year and I didn't remove anything of Tony's until 2 years ago, until 4 years later. Like his shoes where he last left them were still there. Everything in his drawers, like everything. And I didn't even realize when she said that it hit me. There's a piece of us that we have to let go, not let go of them, not let go of
Mhm.
the love, not let go of any of that, but let go of the hope that they're coming back in physical
Mhm.
form because they're not. And that's I struggled with that for a long time. Like I would look at the stairs, truly hoping he would come up the stairs magically.
Mhm.
So that's what shifted a lot for me when she said that. And I realized because I was afraid that if I let go of the fact that he really isn't here anymore and he's not coming back, that like you said, that I would just go on and forget him. And it hasn't, honestly, my relationship with Tony is so beautiful in a way that because he was 11 years older than me, so I understand now that I'm in my 40s. I understand a lot of things that he was going through and a lot of things that
Mhm.
he experienced, and I'm like getting to know him in a whole other way. And
Mm.
like I just our relationship, I if it makes any sense, I love him even more now because I'm just like I'm holding on to him, but not like this, but like this. Like just,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
it's
But
he's such a part of me.
the holding on feels more like like an honoring,
Yes.
not
Yes.
necessarily like cuz
Exactly.
you moved on, right? Like
Yeah.
you started a new
Create
career,
a whole new
helping other
life.
people, you have a new fiance, so there is definitely this is not someone who's still holding on, but he's still
Right.
very much a part of your life. And
Yeah.
um something I'm curious about is your fiance. How is he with the fact that you're still so close to Tony? And I seem to remember that you do what ceremony spreading Tony's ashes and he was there or
Yeah.
something like that? Like I remember that he was part of that. Like he was next to
Yes.
you, and it wasn't like a big thing. It was just like an intimate moment
Yeah.
with you and your fiance
Hmm.
actually honoring Tony's. Like tell me about that because I'm curious what it's like for him and how you've navigated
Yes.
all of that.
Yeah, so I was very honest from the very first day that we met. He didn't
Yeah.
believe me that I was a widow
Uh
because
huh.
he's like, "You're a widow? You're so young." And I'm like, "Yeah, I am, I swear." He's like, "I think of a widow and I think of someone that's like in their 80s or 70s." So I did tell him, I said, "Listen, I know that this is going to be very hard because let's be honest, it is challenging. It's I told him, "You're not a replacement. You never will be. My relationship with Tony was my relationship with him, and it's mine with you is mine with you. But he is a forever part of me, and that isn't going away. And I want you to, if anything feels uncomfortable, or you have any questions, or you don't understand something, ask me anything, anytime." And I explained to him like what my relationship was like and what all the things I went through afterwards and all the changes, and I said what you said. I said this is an honoring, I said I know I was able to recognize love in you because I got to know it through him. He was the
Mm-hmm.
only man that ever truly loved me, and if I didn't have my experience with him, I wouldn't have I wouldn't have been able to recognize this is real love when I found it with you. And anytime I do anything with honoring him, like his birthday, yes, I went to DR and I spread some of his ashes. I told him, you don't need to do this with me. I understand this is like a can be an uncomfortable thing. I'm doing this, but you don't have to be a part of that. I won't feel bad. And he said, no, I want to do everything with you. I want to be a part of you. I think it's beautiful that you honor him. And I think it's
Mm.
amazing that, after all the bad relationships he went through, you actually found someone that loved you the way you deserved. And he's like, and I want to honor him with you. So he said for him, it's also like a little, at first he felt a little guilt because he said, like the worst day of your life, was in a way
Mm.
meeting you was the best day of my life. So it's like something so awful and horrible happened in your life, and meeting you is the best thing that happened to me. So he's like, I'll always owe it to him to have met you. So he just felt like it was an honor for him as well to like honor him with me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. You were a grief coach at this point?
When I met him, yes.
So,
I was still in training. I started my
okay,
training. I started, yeah, because
yeah,
I,
because it just felt like such a mature, loving, um, conversation while honoring what you needed, honoring Tony, and honoring your new partner. Like it was just like a real. So I was just curious where if you were being guided completely by instinct there, or if you were already had some like obviously you had your experience
yeah.
that's not gonna go away. But I was curious to see if like you had already started your path to become a grief coach because that conversation seemed like it had a certain level of mastery, in it.
Yeah, it honestly came from like me knowing, because once when Tony died, I knew instantly that pain would be with me forever. I knew that. I said no amount of time, no amount of anything, no amount of work that I did would take that away. Yes, I have expanded myself to hold it fully and be with this pain and live a rich, full, meaningful life again, but the pain is still vividly there. It just looks different, but it's still there. So I knew it wasn't going anywhere. And I also knew I wanted my current partner to feel as important as and as number one as he is in my life as well. I just didn't want him to feel like he's a replacement or a backup or none of that. But also that my relationship with Tony and my continued bond also has, like, they both have to coexist. And it
Yeah.
can be a beautiful thing like it is, and it's just I always communicate with him though. And I said if there's anything ever that's uncomfortable, tell me. Always. Like,
You're always
it's
checking
so
in.
important. Yeah.
Okay, so let's transition to what had you take all of this and decide to become a grief coach. Because one instinct could be like, okay, I've had enough grief in my life. I'm done. Let me move on. Or I've had enough pain. I don't. But there's something about becoming a grief coach almost that I don't want to say, that you are diving into more pain because it's not really your pain, but
Mhm.
obviously it can be uncomfortable when you're supporting, a lot of the work that you do is emotionally heavy. You're a hero for
Mhm.
me. I
Yeah.
just coach people on their business. Um, but what made you want to like dive into that in a deeper way and do that work with people?
It was really, thank you for asking that, because it really, it was seeing in that support group how many, it was the first time that I was around other grieving people. So seeing that so many other widows felt like I did, like, but I don't want to let go of my husband. I don't want to not live this life somehow with a piece of him in any way. Like, I don't want that. And everyone's telling me that I have to. And that's what really got me thinking, we don't have to. And I want to tell you, because I've proven to myself first and everyone else around me that I can still exist in this life with Tony's memory and carry him forward with me, and I don't have to leave anything behind. And other people just, they never even heard of that. They were being told, if you think of your person, even, you're stuck, you're not. So
Mm,
it was just this, I said, this is not, there's so much misinformation out there, and there's like a very limited view, and like there's so much phobia of grief and so much illiteracy and all these things. So I, as you know, I'm just like an empathetic person in general. So like whenever anyone's in pain and I can help out in any way, especially with the how specific in grief, like I said earlier, it's the exception to the rule. It doesn't go away, but it needs to be held and it needs to be witnessed and it needs so many things that there's just very few spaces where that can happen. As you know, there's 700 million widows all over the world. Like there's just not enough spaces to hold everything. And so I wanted to create a space for other women that felt specifically like I did, because there are, to your point, there are a lot of widows that are like, I don't want to be around this, I don't want to deal with this, I want to be the furthest away as possible. But for me, like leaning into it and being in it was actually what was comforting, because it kept me connected to him. And in helping others, it's really been so helpful for me as well.
Say more about that.
Yeah, because so it's so isolating, this whole grief experience. And as much as you have, like I said, support from friends and family, they don't get it. So their support is very limited. But then having a community of other grieving souls, like there are things that happen and things that come up for me, for example, that I can't text my friend about, my friend of 20 years, because I know she's gonna say the last thing I want to hear. But I have my friends. I have a really great friend that I met on TikTok, and she's one of my closest friends, and she's a widow as well. And I always text her and I tell her
Mm.
how I'm feeling, and this came up for me, and we talk it out, and I feel so comforted, and I feel, like I have that release. And so it's
But
just
but for you, because what you said is that the process of you helping others has also been healing for you. So, like, what? Talk a little bit about how you, when you're working with your clients, how has that been impacting your grief?
it's impacting it, because I see myself so much in them and what they're going through. Like since I'm much further out than them, like most
Mm,
of my clients are like the first couple months or the first year, maybe even 2 or 3. And it's so helpful because it reminds me too. Like the further away that I get from the timeline of
mm,
when everything happened for me, like the place of my grief that I am in now is holding on to all these limited memories that I have with Tony, because I'm making so many new memories with other people still in my life and new people that I meet, but my memories with him are so, so limited, right? So I listen to these stories and it reminds me of things that I had forgotten, or not so
mm.
much forgotten, but I just hadn't thought about. And then it brings up stuff in me, and then I recall a new memory, and then I write that down and I relive that. And it's just like really nice to hear other stories that I can relate to so much, and like the love, like this deep, profound love. And it reminds me of my own love, and it brings up stuff for me, like in the most beautiful way. Sometimes it brings up a lot of, the trauma too, but I have the tools to process that and to be with that. But it's just that healing happens in community, and the
Mm-hmm.
grief community really needs each other. Like we just do. We need that space where because grief is so layered, and I'm sure
Yeah.
5 years from now I'll uncover a new layer, and I'll need my community then too. So
Well, I think you said something really important because, I mean, I think in general, when we're struggling with
yeah,
something, our instinct is to go off and handle that on our own, process that
yeah,
on our own. I think grief is even more so, right?
yeah,
Because you, it's
yeah.
just a much bigger
Hmm.
trauma, but also not everybody gets it, or people are trying to be helpful, but then they end up not. So then you probably end up isolating more than normal.
Yeah.
So I think the idea that of getting support, getting
Hmm.
community, getting,
Yeah.
therapy, a coach, it's really important because you don't have to do that alone.
Yeah.
And obviously when you're ready, right? Like when you everything in its step. So you've got this incredible resource on your website. It's the 10 things you wish you knew, or you wish somebody had, or the things that nobody tells you about grief, right? Um, let's we could spend weeks just talking about that. But let's pick the top three, right? Let's for those people that are grieving, let's give them like three uh, tidbits of support that you discovered in your process.
Yes. The first one I would say for me was all the platitudes that you would hear. Well, most of them are well intentioned, of course, but they're very hurtful, and they're actually, I don't want to say the word dangerous, but they are really it can make you go down an even further rabbit hole because it just dismisses what's true for you, and it invalidates what's true for you, and it makes you think that something's wrong with me because this is not. So all the platitudes that I was hearing
So,
left and right.
so this is like
um
it's gonna get better. You have to move on. You
yeah.
know, he's in, you know, like you
And
he would want you to be strong right now, like all those types of statements, right?
yes.
That's what we're talking about.
Yes, especially like, at this time frame, you shouldn't be doing this and that, or you should be X and Y. So then it makes, if you're not there, it just makes you feel like something is wrong with you. And then it sets off a whole other set of things. So all those platitudes, I speak on a lot about that and how to kind of manage that. And the cognitive changes huge. There's so many things, and there's so much shame around the cognitive stuff. Like, I couldn't read a sentence in a book. I can, if I love a book, I can read it in a week. For 2 3 years I couldn't read a sentence without forgetting what I just read, one or two
Mm,
sentences. Like, so many things that the trauma does and that happen in the grief that are completely normal. Or personality changes, some are temporary, some are permanent. The things that I used to do before that brought me joy no longer do, or things that I was okay with, I don't want anything to do with anymore. It's just so many different changes, and you don't, so many grievers experience it, and there's so much shame around it because nobody's talking about it.
mm-hmm,
So I just wanted to normalize that as well. And also how much the world will rush you to get to a certain place, that
mm-hmm.
they think you should be in. And that's the biggest thing. Like, 8 out of 10 widows and grievers reach out to me saying that to me. Like, why are they telling me to get to this place already and to do this and to do that? And I'm just not there, and I don't know how to do that. And so they're like going through so many emotions and so many changes and just so much of such a big process. And then it's like, tidy it up and brush it under the rug, and it's just makes everything 10 times harder. Which
Yeah.
I'll bring to you mentioned something earlier I totally forgot to say. Like, when you said that with a coach, it's somebody that, like, for you, for me, you're a business coach, right? You see so many things that I don't see at all. And I'm like completely unaware. And then you're normalizing certain things for me. You were on the phone with me when I had my breakdown over a mistake I made, and you reminded me of things, and you're seeing things that I can't, right? Because you went through it already, so you can guide me and help me. The same thing for me with grief. Like, I've experienced all those things I know they're going to go through. So it's nice to also remind the person, this is normal, this will happen, this may happen for you, it may look like this. If it doesn't, that's also okay. It may look like that. And immediately I hear, oh my God, thank you. I didn't know that. I didn't know that was normal. I get those DMs, Gary, all the time, like,
Yeah.
thanking me for normalizing something for them that everyone is telling them is not okay. So
Yeah.
that this guide really stems from that, like, to just give validation and information and knowledge and compassion and support for all those things you have no idea about until you do.
Yeah. So beautiful. Yeah, if you should definitely go get it. I'll put a link on it in the show notes so that you can access that. But it's a really powerful guide. And there's so much great content there. As I wrap up, I think one of the resources that I feel people often refer to when it comes to grief is like the 5 stages of grief.
Mm,
What's your thoughts on that? I'm curious, like,
yeah.
do you find that framework helpful? Not helpful?
I didn't thank you for saying that. I realized after, like, I want to say a year of being into my grief journey, that there really aren't any stages to grieve, that the stages are more for the person dying. And it's like
Mm,
Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote that for the person that's terminally ill to come to terms with their own illness and their death. And certainly the griever goes through denial and bargaining and anger and depression, all the things, but those are not the stages. Like, if anything, if grief had stages, it would have like 305,
mm,
you know. So that's also something I mentioned in the guide, because a lot of grievers say, well, I've gone through all that, but I'm still grieving and it's not over,
mm-hmm,
and I feel
mm-hmm.
so. Yeah, the 5 stages were really meant to help the dying person come to terms with their own death and everything else, but not for the griever.
Got it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. Well, my love, just thank you for coming here and sharing your story. And I think you are one of the kindest, just
Mhm.
sweetest people in the world. The love that you have for people and the commitment that you have, like you are a walking bleeding heart, in the best possible way. And the difference that you make for your clients and the people who follow you on your social media is palpable.
Mhm.
I love how, you get just all these messages every day from people who are saying thank you, and you're doing fantastic
Mhm.
work. And I know that it's not easy work all the time, right? It's not easy to, launch a business and do all the things to do a business, but it's also not easy to take on work that there's such a heavy responsibility, to people.
Yeah.
So I just thank you and I honor you. And I know Tony is so freaking proud of you.
Aw.
So freaking proud of you. Like,
Thank
he's
you.
sitting
Thank you
over there
so
going like, that's
much.
my girl. Yes.
It's exactly what he would say. I
Yeah.
swear. Thank you so much, Gary. Thank you for having me. Thank you for your time. I love chatting with you. And thank you for all of your help and all the amazing work that you're doing, because all the wonderful positive changes in my business on the business end of things are all thanks to you. And we're just getting started. So
We
thank you
are.
so much.
We are. Okay, if you have questions, if you're dealing with grief, reach out to Catherine. Have a conversation. Don't try to do this alone. You don't have to. You deserve to be supported and held during the most difficult time of your life. So I will give you her contact information. What's your website, just for people?
So it's Grief Embraced with Love. You can find me on Instagram or on TikTok under that handle.
Yes. All right,
Yes.
my love. Big hug to you.
Thank you.
I don't have a great deal of experience with losing a loved one like Catherine did. I can't even begin to imagine what that would feel like. So I don't want to give a great deal of advice here like I normally do. What I do want to say is I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you have lost your loved one, and it's incredibly unfair. And you have the right to feel however you are feeling for as long as you need to feel it. This is your process, and no one gets to tell you how to go about it. No one. With that said, my wish, my prayer for you is that when you are ready, that you seek some support, that you seek community and seek some help. This is probably the loneliest experience that you will ever have in your life, but you don't have to do it alone. I'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Ownership Game with your host, Gary Montalvo. Make sure to like and comment on your favorite podcast platform, as well as subscribe so that you never miss an episode.